Here we go. One. Good morning, everybody. And that song for you jazz aficionados is called Bourbon Street Parade. And that was written in 1955. And that is part of New Orleans' famous songs. If you ever go down there and go into any jazz club, you're bound to hear that played. Now, where do you go on the internet or on TV and you're expecting to see an interview and the interviewer comes out and plays a classical or an old Dixieland piece or a standard on a golden horn? I'll tell you where to go. Life After Scientology, and I am Ron Miscavige, and welcome to this episode. So let me put my horn away. Okay. So listen, to kick off the show this morning, let me start off with, we have a brand new Patreon, Amy Hawk, $1. Amy, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And all of you out there who are watching the show, if you'd like to participate in it, the easiest way to do it is become a Patreon. And you can do it from anywhere from $1 to whatever, $100 or whatever you'd like to do. That's totally up to you, but it'll change you from being a watcher into a participant, because you're contributing to something that will enlighten a lot of people as to the dangers and abuses of the Church of Scientology. So I welcome you to join, and without many further words, except this, there is a great show coming up, and you should have the link to it pretty soon. I guess we'll just send it out to all of our patrons and anybody who subscribes. And it's the 60-minute show in Australia, which I was interviewed on. And on that show, you have Leah Remini, Mike Rinder, Tony Ortega, and of course myself. And I'll tell you, I watched part of it today. I didn't have time for the whole thing because I had to come and do this interview. I mean, it is top quality and very good journalism. And when I say journalism, I mean journalism in the true sense of the word, exposing the truth. And a lot of shows do not do it. The production qualities of it, everything is first class. So there's a pitch for that show, and I really invite you to watch it because you're going to love it. And now this morning, we have a very articulate individual. He's a brilliant guy. I hope you can live up to this introduction, Chris, all right?
I know, right?
And he's been fighting a good fight for a long time, and I really appreciate what he's done, and I'm very pleased to have this gentleman back. So we're going to take up some subjects, and I'm sure you're going to be very much more enlightened after you watch this show than you were before you started watching it. So please welcome Chris Shelton. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Ron. Thanks for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. Now, I have some notes here because we went into some of these things on the phone and back and forth on email.
Yep.
But to kick it off with, and I have notes so I don't forget some of the points we wanted to take up. Now, Scientology has what they call Scientology Media Productions, SMP. That's the right initials. Is that right, Chris? SMP?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, sump pump, right? Okay.
That's right.
So anyway, that's like, I guess it was Russia who had this newspaper in the Soviet Union called Pravda. Pravda. That means truth. That means truth. And there was nothing but lies in it. So they have their own social media television thing right now, and it's pure propaganda. But they're using it in a way that maybe you haven't thought about, and maybe none of us have. It's actually a distraction to keep people from seeing what they actually are doing. Chris, why don't you take this up to begin with, and let's expand this, okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, Scientology Media Productions and the Office of Special Affairs work together to present a public image, public relations image to the world about what Scientology is. And the idea is that it's this wonderful, happy, joyous experience that all these people, all these supermodels that they hire, these actors to play Scientologists because they don't get real Scientologists to do it. And they present this goofy image, right? And they think, and this is the amazing thing, I've really been putting a lot of thought and research into this over the last few months, and been learning quite a bit about, well, sort of unlearning a lot of Hubbard's nonsense that I was we were all indoctrinated with for all those years. And I've been coming to realize just how kind of intense and deep some of that indoctrination goes. So we have this, I normalized, for example, as a course supervisor and Sea Org member and staff member, I had normalized so much of Scientology, and it's taken me years to start seeing, oh, that wasn't normal, right? That wasn't the way things should be. That wasn't how, that isn't how life actually works. And so they're pumping out this imagery that Scientology creates this wonderful experience, and isn't it also so great? But it doesn't do any of those things. But then two, they're using that as air cover to, I don't want to get all, like strategic or military or something, but they're kind of using the distraction of social media and the noise and attention that creates, like their Stand League website that supposedly says that religious bigotry is alive and well in America and Scientology is being persecuted, which is completely ridiculous. In fact, it's actually insultingly ridiculous because they make comparisons. Yes,
Chris. Stand, that stands, each letter stands for something. Do you know what?
Yeah, that's right. The Stand League. It's sort of like Scientologists taking a stand for human rights or something, or for against bigotry or against discrimination. That's what it is, against discrimination.
Okay, so none of the staff at OSA or anybody in the Sea organization ever stood in front of a mirror and said it to themselves, have they?
Exactly. Exactly.
You talk about contradiction in terms. Yeah. My friend. Okay, go on, Chris. I just wanted to.
Well, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Something, and it does stand for bullshit. But anyway, go on.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, Scientologists taking, whatever. So, I mean, it's just so hypocritical and it's so obvious. And here's the thing. I was really doing my nut about this. I was trying to figure this out for a long time. Like, why would they invest so much time and seemingly invest money, a little bit of money, into this social media presence that has no real return on investment? They tweet things out. They have these crappy bullshit websites against you, especially. I mean, they really hate you. I actually went through all their websites. There's more anti-websites against you than there is anybody else, even Leah.
Well, there you
I
go.
mean, you are number one target for them on the internet.
Say what you want. Bring it on, because guess what? I'm not going to stop doing this. Go on.
Boom. So they have all this stuff, and you kind of wonder, why are they doing this? What's the point of doing this? Because it's not like they're convincing anybody that they're legit. Normal, regular people, not ex-Scientologists, not Scientology critics. Regular folks look at this stuff and they think, this is nuts. I mean, I've heard it over and over and over again. People actually come to my channel because of this stuff. And they go, these guys are crazy. It was obvious that they were nuts. So I wanted to find out more, so I came to your channel, right? So, so you wonder why, you know, it can't be that they're so stupid at the Office of Special Affairs and at Scientology Media Productions that they don't know this. I mean, they see comments, they see what's going on. And I started thinking, and here's an idea. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. But I'm open for feedback on this. But I think that is all smoke and mirrors. I think it's all just that all their whole social media presence is just a distraction to tie up us critics. Because we look at what they say, we comment on it all the time, and look at what they put out, and it consumes some of our attention. And I started seeing this a little more clearly about 2 weeks ago when my wife and I just totally randomly, not having to do anything with any of this, started a 30-day challenge where we went off social media. So I haven't been on Facebook or Twitter or any of this stuff in a couple of weeks. And not having any of that distraction, not just regular social media, but specifically the Scientology stuff, has really shown me how time-consuming that can be, how it can become for us, even just talking about it or commenting on it. And I think that is the purpose of why they set up those accounts and why they do that stuff. It's just to, you know, sort of distract us. Yeah, go ahead.
The penny finally dropped here. In other words,
yes.
Instead of you doing something on your own, you'd be writing comments to them, and that would be taking up your time.
Exactly. And I'm sorry I had such a long-winded introduction to that, but yes, exactly. Or just we sit here and talk about it. They comment on it on the on Tony's underground bunker, and they post screenshots of it, and they insult the Scientologists, and they get all wrapped up in talking about that stuff.
I got it.
Instead of what they should be talking about. And we also talk about this, but we really need to be concentrating on it a lot more. And that is what Scientology is doing out of the public eye, what they're doing that they don't let you know about, that you don't see on social media, but that is happening.
That's a hell of a point. You know, that does make sense to me.
Yeah.
Because if you're concentrating all your efforts on countering what they're saying, you're not doing any pure enlightenment on your part. And listen, exactly. Before we go any further, why don't you tell my viewers how they can view your channel, please?
Oh, yeah. I'm on YouTube. It's Chris Shelton, Critical Thinker at Large is my channel. So if you just look up my name on YouTube, I come right up. And my blog that has all my articles and transcripts of all my videos and everything is mncriticalthinking.com.
M like monkey and N like in Nancy?
Exactly. It was originally Minnesota Critical Thinker because I lived in Minnesota at the time when I started it. So it's MN Critical Thinker. And
that's the abbreviation for the state, right?
Yes, that's right.
MN,
that's
right. Now that's actually a damn good point you made. Something I hadn't thought about. Well,
yeah.
I didn't think about it because I don't bother with that, but I know a lot of people do. But now, how about the social leaders? I mean, is there any way they're using that to try to get to people who are like leaders in real life and get them thinking, hey, well, Scientology is not that bad. You know what they're saying about them? Does that have any part of it, or is it?
Yes, I think that's exactly what's happening. When you have all of us, for example, like, most of us critics, right, wrapped up in what we see, what we don't see is Mike Rinder's daughter, estranged daughter, what is Taryn Touche, whatever her name is?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is cozying up to literally photo opportunities, right? There's pictures of her and the Los Angeles district attorney standing together, smiling for the camera. That is a connection that matters to Scientology. That's the Los Angeles district attorney. And guess what? The Los Angeles district attorney has been sitting on for about the last year. Danny Masterson's case.
Right.
And right. So this guy is accused by 4 women, I think all of them ex-Scientologists.
Yeah.
Of sexual assault. Now maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'm not saying the guy is guilty. What I am saying is that the LA district attorney has had a recommendation from her own office to prosecute on very specific charges. This was all reported on a year ago on Tony Ortega's blog, and she's just been sitting on it. And when we find 5 or 6 months ago, I think it was, that we see these photo ops happening where somebody from within the Church of Scientology's Office of Special Affairs, and that is where Mike Render's daughter, that's who she's working for, when she's smiling with the LA district attorney, you have to wonder, wait a second, what else is going on there? If we see that picture, what are we not seeing? Especially when the result is that Danny Masterson is still not being charged, not being, investigated, not being taken to court, where his victims can have their day in court and actually prove the case, or he can be exonerated. But either way, that needs to happen, and it's not happening.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of thing that I think the Office of Special Affairs is spending a lot of time and a lot of money on, and they're doing it out of the public eye, so we don't even know about it, so we can't, counter it or do anything about it or fight it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I was within the cult, and I used to go to Celebrity Center in the summertime, where they had this event where they would invite people, high rollers from Hollywood, directors, actors, and actresses, and they turned the parking lot into a nightclub. And I will tell you something, this cost quite a few pennies. I mean, they had lobster there that, you could feed an army with. I would go back in the kitchen and look around and just see what they had, and all the wines and everything. But anyway, at that event, they had LA police working there, off duty as security people. When you do that, and I don't know what these guys are getting paid, but that's a cushy little part-time gig you can pull, because I'm sure they're not going to pay them $10 an hour, So
absolutely not.
Connections there, and I know that they contribute. I saw this on Tony Ortega's site. They contribute to police charities, and I saw them turning over this big. When I say big check, I mean large amount of money, but also big, so you could see it on the camera. I saw the OSA people turning this over to the LA Police Department.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they do, right? They get these little photo ops.
Yeah, there's too many loose ends. You just can't overlook this stuff and say, "Oh well, I guess that's the way it is." But the fact of the matter is,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Masterson has not been charged with this. Nothing's been done, and just to get it in the open, that's right. Either find him guilty or exonerate him. Let's get it over with.
Exactly. The other thing is that this stuff that goes on behind the scenes, I think that it's, if we spent more time checking into finding out about those things, right? And I'm trying to adjust, my priorities accordingly, but I'm also letting everybody else know how important this is. Then we can actually start, if we could find out what they're actually working on, who they're actually talking to. And I am talking about civic leaders, government officials, elected officials, law enforcement officials. These are the people Scientology highly values as allies. Wow. They don't have to become Scientologists. They don't care about that. They just want these people on their side. They call it safe pointing.
Right.
Right. It's a whole thing. I mean, Hubbard, looked into this and came up with this whole technology, quote unquote, of handling this stuff. And unfortunately, it actually does work in a number of ways.
Yeah.
When you can make these inroads and you can convince police chiefs, elected officials, mayors, city representatives, state representatives that Scientology is on the up and up, and then look at all this wonderful community service work that we're doing, and look at all this anti-drug work that we're doing, and look at all this literacy programs that we're doing. And now, see, none of that is true. They don't actually do that stuff at all at the level that they say they do, but they put these pictures together and these nice shiny videos and packs of information that look so glossy and look so awesome. Elected officials don't have, lots of groups coming to them with all of this fancy presentations and beautiful graphics and smiling people and claiming to be doing all this good in the community. So they go, wow, this is amazing. This is great. You guys are awesome. Yeah. And they have now safe pointed that elected official or police chief or police officer, whoever we're talking about. And now You know, it becomes a tit for tat thing. It's a, you know, in people, it's subconscious. You don't have to, you know, think about, you know, quid pro quo. It's a natural thing. When people are doing good things for you, you feel obligated to do good things for them. So that's how that works.
Yeah, you're right there. And then they get these people to stand up at the various openings of ideal orgs and say things that they have no idea whether they're telling the truth or not. They think they're telling the truth. And in most cases, it's a complete fabrication of what's going on. It has nothing to do with reality. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's
I
it.
mean,
Their speeches are practically written for them by Scientology.
yeah. And as you pointed out, it does work. People think, these social people think they're telling the truth. And of course, now, as time goes on and more exposing videos, websites, blogs, and everything are bringing out the truth about Scientology, it's going a little bit down to pay grade. So now you're getting a lower official come in on these things. It used to be years ago, you could, like when I went to Buffalo, I was there for the opening of that org. They had the mayor come on and, you know, speak glowingly about the Church of Scientology, which poor fella didn't know. He was just given a party line. Didn't know it, though.
Exactly. You know, he's even up there talking about Buffalo or going Saint Hill size, you know, and he thinks he's like in, you know, in the in lingo, and isn't that cool? And he's so in with the Scientologists. And I'm like, man, I want to sit down with you. I wish I had, you know, the resources and the money to be able to just fly out to Buffalo and sit down with the mayor and go, dude, let me enlighten you about a couple of things. And within an hour, he'd be absolutely horrified, completely turned around, and would never want to have anything to do with Scientology ever again.
Well, I was there for that, so I saw him say it. No, the crowd just went nuts when he, you know, let's have Buffalo go St. Hill size.
Yeah.
Well, that last mention, and these days, is any org going St. Hill size, or is anybody even talking about St. Hill size? I don't think so. I think what they're talking about is repositories and fancy surroundings for air, because that's what they get in these ideal buildings. They open it, everybody goes home, and now it's filled up with beautiful air, you know, not people, air.
Exactly. I still, my favorite expression for this all these years has been idle morgues.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a total aside, but you know, I was drinking a Kool-Aid for a long time, and I had my comeuppance, and I had to come to get my senses back together. But my little grandchildren, Michael and Jessica, I used to take them down to the org on Sundays, and it was a pleasure for them because there was other kids there, and they'd play with them. So one Sunday morning, and that's when I would take them down, it was either Jessica or Michael said to me, Pop, are we going to go to the morgue today?
Perfect.
They were ahead of their time, and they didn't know it. And I didn't know it either. Of course, you know, I just laughed and said, no, it's the org. Okay. So now I'll tell you what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the tone scale, because I think you have some interesting insights on this. And it ties in with this entire subject we're bringing up today. Well, let's get into that, Chris.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have been doing a lot of research on emotions and the tone scale recently for my next video about the, you know, the tech. And I was very, very surprised to learn how little we actually do know about emotions. But then once that all became clear, it became really clear to me how much bullshit Hubbard had created out of thin air about emotions. And what I've come to sort of hypothesize or sort of put out there is that I think he purposefully created the tone scale in such a way as to control people. I think it's a control mechanism. And I'm still fleshing this out. You know, I'm still sort of thinking the whole thing through. But, you know, he makes claims that there is this scale of emotions. You know, for people who don't know what we're talking about, there's a scale. And at the top is joy and happiness and enthusiasm and serenity of beingness. And at the bottom is death, and you're dead and you're dying. And, you know, down in that region, down to zero is horribleness.
Right.
So, and in between, he plotted with numbers you know, on a scale where all of the various emotions fall. So you have body death and grief and fear and apathy, and then you know, you move up to anger and then boredom and interest, and then enthusiasm is basically the scale. And he said that he came up with this because he was watching how pre-clears acted in sessions, and they always followed this scale up and down. Well, we already know that's complete horseshit, if I may be so blunt.
All right.
Because we know he actually just invented all of this out of whole cloth in a, you know, sort of drunken stupor while he was hanging out in Palm Springs in late 1950, early 1951. And from this chart that he created, he then, you know, which was supposed to be a chart of controlling people. He called it predicting human behavior. But when he lectured about it in 1951, when he first released all this stuff, and from that point forward, if you think about it, the tone scale was all about controlling people. You know, remember all those drills about how if you take somebody who's in anger and you match their anger, or you act a little bored, you can control how they're going to act.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
I think that was the whole purpose of the tone scale, right? And that it wasn't just a sort of a sideline thing. Like, that was kind of the thing, because it doesn't work the way he says it does. All these numbers and this whole thing, and people go up a certain way and they go down a certain way. That doesn't happen. But you do have these interesting, with the tone scale, you have a kind of machine for manipulation. Like empathic manipulation. Like, if I empathize with you, you're angry, I'm going to be angry. You're sad, I'll be sad, right? You're a little upset, I'll be a little upset. That's natural empathy. And I think Hubbard probably read about and learned about that stuff from Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie, right?
You know what?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes, it was a massive bestseller back in the day, right?
Oh, absolutely. I read it.
Yeah, everybody did. I mean, it was the thing to know about, right?
Absolutely.
And Hubbard trashed it. In his lectures, he trashed Dale Carnegie, right? He called him Dale Carnegie.
I remember that.
Yeah. He was trashing him all the time. Well, I think he was trashing him all the time because that's what Hubbard did in order to make himself look like he knew something that somebody who really knew, you know, you take these opinion leaders, scientists, officials, people who really know what they're talking about. Hubbard would routinely invalidate them in his lectures to make himself look better. And I think that's what he was doing with Dale Carnegie's stuff. But he was taking Dale Carnegie's stuff and he was going, how do I use this to influence people? Actually, how do I use it to manipulate people? And those are two different words, and they have different connotations. And I think Hubbard was on the manipulation and control side. And he took that stuff and made it, you know, turned it around into something else. And that's what we have with the tone scale.
You know what? I think you're right. And I'll tell you why. When Dale Carnegie talked about matching the guy's tone level.
Yep.
He wasn't talking about influencing him in a bad way. He was talking about influencing the guy that you could get your way and it would be a win for the person who let you have your way. You see what I mean?
Yep.
That's a little different than motivating a person to do something that they don't want to do, or motivating them into following every word you say from there on out. So now you can brainwash them. It's a little bit of a difference there. And I do see that. And I hadn't thought about that, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's a whole thing. And I think Scientologists buy into the whole tone scale because it's a cute little system that looks like it makes sense. And Hubbard gives examples. One of the, you know, this was the other thing I learned recently, or was, you know, it was kind of evaluating, was how does Hubbard do it? You know, because people in the big wide world listen to little snippets from his lectures. We talk about it in our videos, or we quote from his work, and they go, that sounds crazy. And it does. But if you get the bigger, long context of it, there's the way he indoctrinates, the way he teaches is he, one, invalidates other people who actually know what they're talking about. And that automatically sets him up in your head as somebody who knows what he's talking about, and has other secret knowledge he's about to impart to you that the big guys don't have, and this is why they are wrong. See, so you feel privileged a little bit. You feel like you're getting the inside skinny, right?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to tell you something. There's I think another point. Let me throw my 2 cents in right here.
Yes, please.
If people have the answers to things, they feel comfortable with that. You see what I'm saying? In other words,
Yes.
if you're trying to figure out this part of life or that part of life and you don't know the answer, well, you'll kind of either avoid thinking about it or wondering, now, why would that person act that way? Well, if you read his book, Science of Survival, which goes into the tone scale at length, let's face it, as you, oh, of course I know why he's that way. You feel comfortable. You think you know the truth. Whether it's true or not, it almost doesn't matter in your mind. You think you have the right answer, and that is a comfortable feeling.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'll add to that when you go into Scientology thinking you know certain things about, let's say, A, B, and C,
yeah,
and then Hubbard invalidates A and B, it shakes you. It throws you off. You go, wait a minute, what?
yeah.
I thought I knew about that. And then he goes, oh, no, that's not true. But he always then follows up with, but here's what's true. Let me give you the truth.
And then he gives you the quote true unquote answer.
Yeah, he gives you the Pravda.
Oh, okay. Boy, I'm glad that I got that, because I was wrong, but now I know I could be right, you know. And of course, that's
Exactly.
the deal with people; they want to be right. Now, this takes us also into a thing he called the chart of human evaluations, and this is something that they use all the time in getting new people in. And does this work in the real world? That's my question to you, Chris.
Well, you know, it works sometimes. That's the thing about Scientology. You know, I mean, you know, Ron, we ran into stuff that worked, quote unquote, all the time.
Yeah.
It looked like it helped, and sometimes it really did.
Yep.
But there were more exceptions to the rule than there were not. And we were trained to not pay attention to those things and not, you know, that was always our fault that it didn't work the way it was supposed to, or it was the pre-clear's fault or something like that. It was never the tech's fault. So yes, sometimes it works, but most of the time, no. And it's the unpredictability of that that drives you crazy.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'll give you a little example of one point. You remember when he said, if you have a problem that you can't solve, take on more problems or double it?
Yes.
Or words to that effect. Well, there was a guy in the Philadelphia org, and I don't want to mention his name because I'll embarrass him, but he was doing this project and it wasn't working at all. So he spent double the amount of money and it almost bankrupted him. And it didn't work, even spending a double amount of money. So there was one example I saw. He was following that to the T.
Exactly. There are so many instances of that. And that was one of the things that actually I remember that piece of information. I'd forgotten about that if you can't handle one thing, take on two.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, I said it not quite right, but you just said it right. If you can't handle one, take on two.
That's right. And as in the Sea Org, we got piled with that all the time, you know.
Yeah, well, it almost ruined him financially. He just took him a hell of a long time to get out of it, and it didn't solve the problem he was trying to solve in the first place. So there's an example that
exactly. So
your gut feeling and your common sense. If I can't afford my bills, what the hell am I going to do? Go out and buy a Rolls Royce?
Exactly.
And now I'm able to pay for it? Well, of course, that's the thing that the Regis pitch people. Right now, if you do this level, you're going to be able to afford anything. You'll be so powerful. And then I know of a guy up in New Hampshire who had finished OT8. This is back in the early days, many years ago. And he had a pickup truck, and he used to hide that pickup truck because they were trying to repossess it. This is after he finished OT8, and he didn't make any money. And that was a result of it. So he was on the run from repo people. And yes.
Wow. Wow. Oh, yeah. Cause over life. That's definitely cause over life.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah. Well,
but I wanted to make that point there. But
it's a great point. It's a great point. Yeah. And this chart is a thing, you know. Hubbard put this whole thing together. In fact, it was the first thing that was sort of extrapolated or created from this idea of an emotional tone scale. Is he put this whole grid together. It looks like a great big spreadsheet, and it's got columns for different characteristics, and it has boxes for each individual tone level. So, you know, at grief, somebody who's a griefy person, let's say, at that emotion is gonna be this responsible. This is how they're gonna treat children. This is how they're gonna think about sex. There's little boxes and columns for all of these different topics. And from this chart, you're supposed to be able to spot and then predict people's behavior. And Hubbard, I mean, this guy, you know, I go back to the original lectures on this, and you actually watch him, listen to him very carefully explain how all this works. And he contradicts himself within 3 paragraphs of himself. I mean, it's crazy. He says, for example, this is just a stupid, silly example, but for example, he says that somebody who is at 0.5 on this scale is going to have gray, pallor skin. He's going to have cast, you know, he's not going to look so good. He's dying. Right. He's not doing great.
Right.
And you go, great. There's a way to spot that, you know, skin tone. Okay, great. And he presents this as, here's how you can spot these tone levels. This people will have body problems, or they'll be sick, or their skin will be, you know, however. But then, like I said, stupid example, but then, you know, 3, 4, 5 minutes later, he's way higher on the scale. He's like up at, you know, 1.0 or 1.5 or something. And he brings up this gray skin thing again. So you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought that was back, you know, at the other one. And he goes, oh, no, it's this whole, you know, it's there and it's here and it's there. And he's throwing out these different characteristics and stuff that just contradict one another. And it takes kind of careful listening of his lectures to listen to this, because I didn't catch it when I was in Scientology. It just sort of made sense, kind of, you know. But you listen carefully and you start seeing, now he's just making stuff up from one point to the next in the middle of these lectures, and you can actually watch him doing it if you're careful, if you pay attention to what he's actually saying.
Yeah, well, of course, you and I both know, Chris, that the one thing he did have going for him was he spoke in a very authoritarian tone.
Yes.
When he would speak, you felt, and this is, you know, for the people who were in Scientology drinking the Kool-Aid, you felt there's no way this guy is not telling me the truth. What he's saying absolutely is true.
Oh, very sincere. Yes. He came across. Yeah.
And you do this for weeks and months and years, you'll accept anything. You'll accept anything, and you feel comfortable because you feel that you're getting the truth about everything, which couldn't be further from the truth than that.
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah.
But you know, there really is something to that, though, isn't there, Ron? I mean, this feeling that you have the truth, you know?
Yeah, you have the answers to everything. What could be better?
Yeah, exactly. It's a very comfortable place to be, I gotta say.
Yeah.
You know, it's very uncomfortable not knowing. It's very uncomfortable being unsure of things. We want to be sure of things. And Hubbard assures you over and over again that this is it. You found the answer. The search is over. You don't have to wonder anymore. You don't have to be confused. You don't have to be upset. Life can be productive and predictable and wonderful. Who would not want that?
Well, I'll tell you, it's very clever, isn't it? And then
it sure is.
There's another thing that people do when they know this tone scale. That guy's a 1-1. Oh, he's 1-5. You know what I'm talking about, Chris, and I think you have something to say about this too.
Absolutely. Yeah, the labeling that goes on with this. And this is another one of those control and manipulation mechanisms, because how do you convince people that a whole swath, the whole section of the population are inherently bad people, not because they are intentionally, you know, evil, that not that they're trying to be, you know, evil, but it's just the way they are. They can't help themselves. They have, you know, it's their tone level. It's how they are. And the only real solution to that is Scientology auditing. It's the only thing that will raise you on the tone scale, right? Permanently. And so Hubbard gets away with this, convincing his followers that there's this tone level called 1.1, covert hostility. And inside this band of covert hostility, he puts the entire LGBTQ community, all of them, no exceptions. If you have any kind of inkling in that direction, you are 1.1 on the tone scale, period, end of story. You know, if you don't like kids so much, you're probably 1.1.
Yeah.
If you have ever told a lie, you've acted 1.1. You know, like there's all this baggage that comes with this label. And we as Scientologists would soon learn that you could write off whole sections of the population this way. You could just go, oh, he's 1.1. And I don't have to think about him anymore. I don't have to put any more attention on him. I don't have to, you know, I just write him off with that. And of course, you know, we all use labels this way, but Scientology makes a science out of it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there are people that I'd just soon not be around, but I'd say, okay, that's the way they are, and they can get along with certain other people, but I just don't like being around them. But I wouldn't condemn them for being that way. Do you see what I'm saying?
Exactly. There's, you know, you have to take each individual on their own merits is kind of really the moral of the story here. I don't have, you know, there are plenty of people of all different walks of life that I have all kinds of problems with, and I don't want to associate with, and that's fine, but that's on an individual basis. Hubbard gives Scientologists an excuse to, like I said, write off whole swaths of the population all at once. And literally, let's remember now, Jeffrey Augustine loves quoting this because it's so insane, from Science to Survival, from the first book where he talked about this emotional tone scale back in 1951 when he wrote it. He said flat out, these people should be gotten rid of. In other words, literally, if you were going to carry out Hubbard's advice about that, you would be creating concentration camps or death camps, and you would just be marching these people in for no other reason than because L. Ron Hubbard said they are 1.1. Therefore, they are evil, malicious, horrible people who will backstab you at any moment, and it's better to just get rid of them than have them in society.
Yep, and I'll tell you that
is called genocide.
In that book, and it's even in the current book. And you don't have to buy the book to find this out. You can look it up on YouTube, and where he says they should be disposed of.
Exactly.
And, but you know, this, when you're in and you kind of just, oh well, he said that, and you glance over it as if he never said anything like that. I can remember reading it, and I thought, wow, that's something. You know, I continued reading. You're in such a state of mind that everything you're learning is true. You just think, well, maybe I don't agree with that, but okay, he said it, so that's the end of that. You don't examine it for what it is, because if somebody says somebody should be disposed of in my life now, I say, hey, hang on a minute, man. What the hell are you talking about here? You know, I'd stop them in their tracks. When you're in and you're getting this state of mind, you don't question it. It's terrible.
It is awful. It really is. It's so subtle sometimes. You know, you just pass, like you said, you just kind of glance over this. I remember reading Science or Survival like 3 or 4 times when I was in Scientology. And every time when I hit that part, I thought to myself, well, he's only talking in a very theoretical sense. Exactly. You know, he doesn't really mean that we would go march all these people off and kill them. But when you look back at what he's writing, that's exactly what he's saying.
No, you're right, Chris. I should have said it because I couldn't quite think of how to say it in so many words. But you hit a nail on the head.
Yeah, it's just pure evil, and it was easy for us to write it off. I mean, you know, we weren't there because we were trying to be evil people. So when Hubbard was saying evil things, we thought, he didn't really mean that. Yeah. Yes, he did. Yeah, he actually did mean it.
Yeah, and then this takes us over into how do you raise a person up that tone scale? Well, L. Ron Hubbard said many times, the only reason for auditing is to raise a person on the tone scale. So why don't we just take up a little bit of auditing or counseling? Because
Oh boy. Yeah.
I'm sure you have some thoughts on this. So let's get into that.
Yeah, auditing, man. I've really been doing a number on that. I did a podcast this week about training, about study, and because I was a course supervisor and I supervised for years, and I trained a lot of auditors, so I know all about what it takes to make an auditor. But I hadn't really, in all these years I've been out, I hadn't really thought thoroughly about how we made auditors and how that process alone is an abusive process. So I ended up taking 2 hours explaining all of it. It was, and I didn't even explain all of it, but it was quite an interesting podcast to do for me because it made me reevaluate auditing. And I suddenly realized, duh, that it's destructive. I mean, we kind of knew that. And we have talked about it in terms of how it is similar to hypnotism in many ways, how it is trance-inducing, how you can make suggestions to people and they can kind of subconsciously act on those suggestions. That's all part of auditing. But what I hadn't looked at was how authoritarian it is as a quote-unquote counseling process. It's not a counseling process. What it actually is it's a process where the pre-clear, the person who's being counseled, or the patient, so to speak, is actually being told all the things that's wrong with him. And he is being forced to run through these processes, these commands or questions that are asked, sometimes for hours on end, thereby inducing trance states. But they're forced to do this. And that alone makes it a non-counseling type of environment, because how do you counsel somebody? By overriding their free will, or what we called in Scientology, their self-determinism. It's,
Okay, so like, let me get this straight.
Yep.
Because this is a new thought. If in my book,
yep,
I guess the most gains, to put it in a way, that I ever got from processing was when I was allowed just to examine something and give my thoughts on it until I come up to a realization on my own. But there are repetitive processes. Is that what you're talking about?
That's part of what I'm talking about. Yes, the repetitive processes are part of this.
Explain that to our audience.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sometimes there are many, many processes. There are thousands of different processes in Scientology, and a great many of them are called repetitive processes, where 1 or 2 or 3 questions are asked over and over and over. And this can go on for many, many hours. Like, you could be asked a question like, recall a time, or given a command, recall a time that was really real to you. And you could be asked that or told to do that. And then you say, oh, yeah, sure, there was this time I had an ice cream when I was 4 years old, and it tasted great. And you go, good. And then the auditor says, recall a time that was really real to you. And you then recall another time, and then another one, and another one. And after doing this for hours, I mean, it gets excruciatingly painful. You're forced to continue. If you get to a point where you're like, man, I felt good about this, an hour ago, and now we keep going, and you're making me keep going, and I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't productive for me or useful. And you're paying, remember, hundreds of dollars an hour for this. Not $50 an hour, not $80 an hour. You're paying hundreds of dollars an hour for this. So you get to the point where you go, man, I'm done with this, and the auditor's entire job is to not listen to a goddamn thing you have to say, but to override your free will, your determinism, and make you do the process with this misbegotten notion that there is this reactive mind that has these engrams in it, and we're going to run them out. And that's authoritarian. And that's kind of my point, is the whole structure of auditing is that way. And it's almost a misnomer to call it counseling.
That's a different take on it, and I'm telling you, well, it's something that you don't think of very much, because once this is done to you several times, you get in a state of mind where you expect that and you just go along with it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'll give you another example. The book in the bottle,
Oh, yes.
Procedure. Now, just tell them, because you're the one I'm interviewing.
Oh, man, yeah. Okay, opening. Rod, I'm glad you brought this up. Opening procedure by duplication is what it's called. I have no idea why. It's just some fancy term for a pure torture session. You and the auditor are in a room. There's a book and there's a bottle, and it's like a wine bottle, right? It's empty. There's nothing in it. There's no, usually there aren't even any labels or anything on it. It's just a plain glass bottle, and it doesn't matter what the book is. Any book will do. The book goes on one table on one side of the room, the bottle on the other, and the auditor tells the pre-clear, look at that bottle or look at that book, walk over to it. What is its color? What is its temperature? What is its weight? And you answer those, you pick it up. He says, pick it up. You pick up the bottle. You answer those 3 questions about it. Then he says, put it down in exactly the same place. And you do. And then you go over and he does the same thing with the book. And then you go back to the bottle, back to the book, back to the bottle, back to the book, answering, picking it up each time, answering the 3 questions, putting it down in exactly the same place. And you continue doing this process. And this, again, Hubbard recommends, he actually says, you need to do this process for well over 25 hours.
Well, per time, I remember we would do it for 4 hours straight.
Yep.
As a pre-clear, and then you turn around and you would be the auditor and you do it for another 4 hours straight with your auditor who was now a pre-clear. And I had this done on me when I first got into Scientology at the Cherry Hill Mission. And after 4 hours, we went down to a restaurant and I had a martini. Of course, I didn't know you shouldn't do that, but I needed some fucking relief.
Right.
Beside myself, I mean, exactly. I felt like going to a gym and lifting weights or something. And then, of course, the mission holder says, we heard you had a martini, because the person who was auditing me went down with me and didn't say anything when I ordered it. And then she turned me in. She says, Ron had a martini. And he said, you knew that you shouldn't have had a martini. I says, no, I didn't. And we had a big argument over this. But yeah, I just felt so bad,
Right.
But then you get used to doing it. Now, what does that mean? You get used to stifling your own emotions on it. Where if somebody did it, you say, hey, what the fuck are you doing? This is the end of this, man. Okay, you got your answer. See you later.
Exactly. I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because that's exactly where this is going, is the result of this kind of counseling, quote unquote, this kind of authoritarian auditing is a docile, tame, backed off, introverted person, which is the exact opposite of what Scientology claims to be making with its auditing. Yeah. They want you docile. They want you submissive, because if you're not, they're going to send you to the ethics officer, right?
Yeah.
And, they're going to make you submit, right? I mean, it's all about submission. And this was such a sign of revelation for me personally, just within the last week, seeing how clearly this whole structure of auditing was created to produce people who truly think that they are freer, happier, more in control of their lives, while in fact, they are more pliant, more submissive, more compliant to the orders and directions they receive from Scientology.
That is one hell of a point, Chris. I am telling you. If this were what they call an auditing session, I would say we hit the end phenomena, but I'm not going to stop here because there's another subject I want to take up.
Yeah.
That is the state of mind you get into, yet you think you're more self-determined. You think you're more pan-determined. In fact, you're not. If somebody would call you to an org to come and see the ethics officer, you comply with it. You go there. Now, if you were freely independent, say, well, wait a minute, why do I have to see him? Well, we can't tell you. Well, I'm not coming. That's the independent thinker.
That's right. That's right. And that's how you knew when somebody was becoming disaffected. Again, out come the labels, right? Oh, he's disaffected. He's PTS. Oh, he must be connected to an SP or something. Out come all these labels, and we better handle this guy. I mean, look at the language. We better handle this guy. Like literally put my hands on this guy and deal with him. That's what handle means. And we just accepted all this language as totally normal. Sure, that makes sense. And you know, of course, it doesn't make sense. That's kind of the point.
Nope, it doesn't at all. And let's just get into this for a little bit, because we're coming up to the witching hour here.
Yeah.
The org structure and ethics, the way they handle it, what you just said, they're set up to handle independent thinkers. They're set up to keep you in line.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's like the wire they have around a herd of cows that there's electricity running through it. Well, you can roam all through this little structure here, but you get over by that wire, you're going to get a shock. And if you start thinking, hey, wait a minute, get in here, the ethics officer wants to see you. Wow.
That's right. That's right. The whole structure of the organization is built to create that, exactly what you just described. Because the auditing session's authoritarian, and that's the one-on-one, we're going to beat you down.
Yeah.
But then you come out of there, everybody's smiling, everybody's happy, up until the moment you say anything like, you know, of independent thought, like, well, I agree with Hubbard about this and this and this, but I'm not so sure he's got this right. A hush, you know, a hush falls over the room. Wait, what?
Everybody gets quiet at that point.
Exactly. It's very awkward, right? What? You don't,
what have we here, you know?
Exactly. And immediately, if you'll cast back, I think you'll agree with me on this, that immediately in the back of your head, you'd be thinking to yourself, as the good Scientologist, that guy's got something going on.
Yep.
Right? That guy's got some out ethics situation. That guy has, you know, or he's a little 1-1, or he's PTS. Like, out come these labels again. We automatically were thinking that way, that he doesn't agree with Hubbard. Something's up there, and we were immediately suspicious.
In other words, the trance is wearing off.
Exactly. Or for, you know, in the case of people who are newly coming on board, all the claws hadn't quite fully sunk in yet, right? So the guy still had some vestiges of independent thinking. He could still have an opinion about Scientology that wasn't, you know, the group think.
Wow.
And we knew, as other Scientologists, when we would, you know, hear somebody talk like that, oh, he's just not yet fully cognited, or again, if we started thinking badly about the person, we would start putting these labels on them, and we had to handle that person because they were somewhat off the rails for having those thoughts.
Wow, that's so true. I want to ask my producer something.
Yeah.
Do we have time to take any questions? Or can we?
Yep.
Chris, I'll tell you what, because listen, we could go on in this, but I think this point that you just made is really the point of all points, that you make a person into a docile, obedient, non-free thinking participant in a game that maybe he'd rather not play, but doesn't feel he has any right to get out of it somehow.
Exactly. That was great. That was exactly right. I think that description, I'm going to use that, because that is exactly right.
Yeah. So let's see if any of our listeners have any questions here, because
sure.
As long as I have you on the air, let's
do it
too, you know. Sean, do we have any?
Not at this point, no.
Cool.
But I did put it out there to see. Teresa had 2 questions, she said.
Okay. So Sean's looking at the...
since the PC is audited for hours, inducing a trance-like state, doesn't the auditor also get exhausted as well? Do they also get into a trance? I can see how that can happen.
Yes.
Did you hear that? Okay, go on. You can answer that.
I'll answer it. Yeah, sure. Yes, that can happen to the auditor. It happened to me, certainly, as an auditor. Keep in mind, and you might want to watch the podcast I did yesterday to get the full skinny on this, because I really dived into the details. But the way auditors are trained, they're sort of proofed up against that a little bit, because they are trained for hours and hours and hours in learning how to comfortably just sit in a chair and watch somebody and not fall asleep or dope off or let their mind wander. You kind of learn a little bit how to do that as an auditor. So you can kind of maintain some presence and control in the session, while the pre-clear is definitely going all over the place. I've had pre-clears fall on the floor, pass out. I mean, it's all kinds of things happen in sessions. So that's the training is supposed to counter that trance induction in the auditor, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we got another one. Kristen G asks, this is a good one. Does David Miscavige still do auditing?
Well, there's going to be conjecture on both of our parts. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea. And what about you, Chris? You don't.
What I heard from Claire Headley was that the last time he actually ever went in session that she was aware of was back in 1993. I think he got all the way up through to. Did he get on to OT7?
I have no idea.
Do you know? I don't know. I kind of heard that, but I wasn't sure if that was true. But from everything that we've heard from people who were in the know in some way, who have come out, it doesn't look like David Miscavige has had any auditing since the early 90s.
And Claire would know because she worked right in the same office with him.
Exactly. All the way up until what, 2005?
Yeah.
So, so she was around all that time, and she had direct observation of it.
Okay, good.
And Claire's on the show next week, right?
Claire Headley is going to be on the show next week. That's a nice introduction to her.
Yeah.
Awesome.
She's never told her full story. I mean, she's been on the aftermath, and they have other guests on it, so they can't dedicate the whole show to one person. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the aftermath. I love the fact that Mike and Leah are doing this. They're heroes in my book. But Claire's going to be on my show next week, and you're going to hear her full story. And
awesome.
Yeah, I guess we're going to end with this. Lori Pacheca asked, did you two ever meet while you were in, you and Chris?
Did what now?
Did you and Chris ever meet while you were in Scientology?
Chris?
We did. But I don't expect you to remember it at all, because it was just one of those times that you would come down to PAC and you were addressing all the crew. And I saw you at a couple events because you were doing the music, like at the shrine. So I would see you, and I was just a regular Sea Org Joe, they were in PAC, so I wasn't anybody special. So it was literally just walking past you and saying, "Hi, sir," or listening to your presentations on doing sales. And as we talked about in your earlier podcast when I was on here, I actually got a lot out of that. So those were good talks.
Yeah, so I hope to meet you in person, and let's have lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll pick up the tab. How's that? Huh? Any more, Sean?
No, that's all we got right there. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I don't want to go any further because I think we hit a very nice point on auditing and how this is making you into a docile person. It's wild. It's just a fresh look at it. And just do a little business here. Any of you watching this program, I invite you to become a Patreon. I would appreciate it very much. And this will help the ongoingness of what I do every week. And I will continue to do it no matter what. Watch the 60 Minutes Australia when that can come out on YouTube, and we'll send out the link to everybody. So, and again, listen in get your enlightenment and get proofed up against people or churches, cults like the Church of Scientology, and people like Chris Shelton, who didn't read about this in a book. He lived the life, and that's where you're going to get the truth. Somebody who has actually studied it, lived it, and then you'll see the explosion of stuff that you don't want to get involved with them. Sean, do you have a point?
No, I'm just saying, and Claire Headley next week, Sunday.
And Claire Headley, of course, yeah. So there you go. Again, I'm Ron Miscavige. This is the Life After Scientology. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye now.